Our recent Christmas holiday trip began as usual in Charlottetown, and we drove to Goose Bay to catch a flight south to Fort Lauderdale. Ran into some challenges as there was weather happening all over the continent, and so we had to make some changes and get to our destination as quickly as possible. So we left early and ended up getting a direct flight to Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Once we boarded the flight in Halifax, it was only a 90-minute flight till we got to Halifax, and then shortly after that our flight was ready to leave to go to Montreal. We would overnight in Montreal as we couldn't get a flight out until the next morning. We ordered some food in from a local establishment. We ordered some poutine, as is traditional when you're in Quebec, and then we went to bed. Then when we got up in the morning, the snowfall we were supposed to get wasn't as heavy as was expected, which was a blessing for us in more ways than one. So then we got ready to head to the airport for our trip to Fort Lauderdale. This was a very uneventful flight as well. We ended up taking off at the appointed time and then had about a 2.5 hour trek to Fort Lauderdale before we would land and go to our hotel and spend the night there as well. Overall, things worked out beautifully considering the weather forecast that we were given earlier. Once our plane arrived, it was getting a little bit easier to relax as we were unsure if we were going to make all the connections with the weather that was happening in eastern Canada and in western Canada. But we were able to get past a bit of the snow that was forecast. As you can see here, the tarmac is pretty wet, and that's the way it was in Montreal when we were waiting for our flight to leave that evening. So overall, we didn't anticipate any problems, but still it was a little bit apprehensive just waiting to get on the plane and then get off the tarmac on our final trip to Fort Lauderdale. And that would happen shortly into the afternoon, and then we saw our first glimpse of the coast of Florida shortly before sunset that evening. And then we headed to land and then head to our hotel for another overnight stay, our first one in Florida in a number of years due to the pandemic. Overall, very thankful to be able to make all the legs that we had to make given the situations that we had. Temperature here was a little bit cold, but we were now in Florida and able to make our connection with the cruise ship, which would happen. We stayed in Fort Lauderdale as our boat wasn't leaving until the next day. So we just looked at some of the sights and sounds through our hotel window while we awaited our transportation.